It's not a secret. America is living paycheck to paycheck, and in this video, we're gonna take a deep dive of not just why and how and what it means for everyone to live paycheck to paycheck in the United States, but we're gonna talk about some of the psychology around money and how inflation is changing just day-to-day life, but people aren't changing themselves and their habits to basically accommodate the way the economy and just what life is relative to how their parents were at the time. I promise you guys this is gonna be a super juicy video. We're gonna dive into just why everyone's living paycheck to paycheck, how to break the model, what you need to do, and how to understand how this affects you. Regardless of the situation you're in, you're gonna learn something, you're gonna take something away, and at the very least, at the end of the video, you'll be a little bit smarter about just how the economy and how your kind of focal site of what money and finance means to you and what it should mean to you. Before we get too far into the video, guys, if you want to see more content that's going to help you retire early, make more money, whatever it is, hit that subscribe button right down below. It's absolutely free to do. I'm not going to sell you a course. All I'm going to do is ask you to click that subscribe button. Helps me to grow the channel, and I promise you guys, you will get something out of it. It is not just free, but it will return something for you. You might just make a little bit more money or save a little bit more money or get out of debt because of it. So let's just jump right in. So we know from the data that most people are living paycheck to paycheck, regardless of how much you make. You'd actually be surprised. I think from $100,000 to $150,000, you actually have the highest percentage of paycheck to paycheck earners, but that is skewed a lot by socioeconomic issues and all kinds of stuff with assistance and all different kinds of living situations. But basically, people are paycheck to paycheck across the board. You've got significant people paycheck to paycheck from low, middle to high income earners. And it's for one simple reason. It's because people are trying to live the lives that their parents lived. And unfortunately, in a perfect world, this would be absolutely amazing. But unfortunately, for the first generation ever, we haven't seen this kind of linear growth in humankind where you're supposed to live a better life than your parents. There have been a lot of wealth transfers to our parents' generations, and if you're older and you're hearing me say this, it's unfortunate, but it's absolutely true. COVID is a great example of a massive wealth transfer and wealth accumulation for a generation that, while they needed it, right, it shouldn't have been had because it has broken the system, right? And we all grew up, regardless of how old you are, from whether you're 15 or you're 40, you grew up with a set of parents that were able to do things, consume things, be materialistic in a way that you cannot do today. You can't model your life off of that because things cost proportionally larger amounts of money and your income isn't as strong and the cost of living is higher. And that's not necessarily a fixable thing. We're not talking like, oh, it's 8, 10% what we're talking about inflation. We're talking about like a 30% to 40% differential in how that apparent item felt to your parents relative to you. And we haven't adjusted. We, because we grew up this way, want to spend the same way, but proportionally, both our parents, when they were acting the way they did to build their own habits, their money went longer, but they also, that money that went longer, they were able to save more of it, which is compounded in the best years of growth in the last 30 or 40 years. And they've had more disposable income than they otherwise would have had for somebody that was in a similar situation of them in today's money in today. That was a lot, right? The short answer is the reason we're living paycheck to paycheck is we're spending like our parents did, and you simply cannot do that, right? The world has changed. Things are more expensive. Resources are more scarce. We're making less money. We can't spend like our parents did. And unfortunately, what that really means is to break the habit of living paycheck to paycheck, we all need to individually adjust how we live. And I get the comparison is the thief of all, right? When you say, okay, I'm gonna be the first person that I'm not gonna go do X, Y, and Z, or I'm not gonna have this, right? We look at all of our peers and we're like, dang, they get to have it, they get to enjoy it, they get to do it. How is that fair? Well, it's not. And it's not fair to them either because they're going into debt. They're not gonna be able to retire. They're gonna live a worse life. If you delay your gratification and you don't do it, you're actually getting the upper hand. You're not getting the instant gratification, but you're gonna get out of the system of paycheck to paycheck life, and eventually you will have the ability to go enjoy these things. But because everyone's living paycheck to paycheck, and most things that fall into this bucket are purchased via debt, via credit card or something like that, when you can't actually afford what you're spending, you got a problem, right? And the numbers don't lie. Most people spend more than they make. How is that possible, right? So we have a bigger problem here. That's why people are living paycheck to paycheck. And the answer is easy. You need to cut back, right? And I know that that's a hard pill to swallow. It's almost not even a question of making more money. You can go make more money, But if you spend accordingly to the more money we make, we know psychology says that, you're going to have the inflated lifestyle, right? You're going to have lifestyle creep, and that if you make $50,000 more, you're going to surround yourself with other people making $50,000 more, and then your cost of living goes up because you're going to buy a nicer home, or you're going to have a nicer car, or your frame of reference changes. And although I wish it was easy to say, oh, that's not true, that won't be me, it's even happened to me, right? In a perfect world, I wouldn't own a house in the Boston area. I wouldn't drive the car that I drive. I wouldn't do all these things, but I've done that because those pieces of money mean a little bit less to me now that I make more money in my life. And, as a kid, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that way, but I've fallen into that psychological bucket of what's happening, right? So I'm not even perfect myself, right? But that's why people are paycheck to paycheck. And the answer to solving your problem is pretty simple. I don't like, I can almost blanket statement 99% of the people watching this video, and let me say it this way. 99% of you guys watching this video, just according to basic data and statistics, are living to paycheck, and you can get out of the system, right? It might feel impossible, but by cutting back a little bit and doing a little bit of saving and readjusting how you live your life, you will break that cycle, right? And I would say probably 50% of you guys that are watching that are paycheck to paycheck think that you fall in the 1% that you can't break it. And I'm telling you, it is absolutely not true, because the US economy wouldn't be where it is if that was the case. If you think you're in a position where you're that 1% that can't break paycheck to paycheck, you need to confirm that you haven't gone out to eat this year, right? And you might be like, oh my God, that's crazy. But you can be very frugal and make your own money and sacrifice for a year. That's not very hard to do. Most of us that are frugal, like I go out to eat maybe 4 times a year, right? Sure, it's fun, but I'd rather save some money and enjoy and be abundant in an area that drives more value to me, right? Yeah, it's fun, but I love cars. I'd rather spend a little bit more money on my cars than going out to eat on something that I can make at home. And because of that, I'm a really good cook, right? And I can make really good food. That's just one example. The same goes with coffee or whatever these social media trends are about saving money. It can be applied, right? I live abundantly in the areas that you love and cut back in the areas that don't bring you as much joy. And if you can do that correctly, you'll still be able to get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle and save and retire and do all those things. But honestly, the most important thing with what I just said is you'll be able to enjoy the things that you really enjoy doing, right? And the classic example is, I preach a lot of frugality. I preach a lot of savings, trying to be cheap and all these things. And people are like, I love to travel. So I say, travel, or maybe even travel more than you did before, but cut out all your other spending in your life. And you know what those people do after a year? They come back and they say, it was the best year of my life. I went to here, I went to here, I went to here. And when I traveled, I lived life up and I got to explore all these things. And this thing that I absolutely love doing, I went out and did it more than I was ever able to do it. And it was totally worth the small sacrifices to things that I just realized that didn't bring me that much joy. They made my life more convenient. They were good. They were instant gratification. It made me kind of happy. But going on 4 trips instead of 1 trip, and that 1 trip being like the hardest thing to afford ever, those extra 3 trips were so much more worth it. And if you're like, oh, those numbers don't add up, well, the scale absolutely does. You can go take a week-long trip in the equivalent cost of going out to eat at a restaurant with a family like 4 or 5 times, right? Great example, because you guys are going to be lasering me in the comment section below. I go diving in the Cayman Islands for a full week, a couple times a year for like $1,000, which granted, that's expensive. That's because I'm diving every day, right? But that's just an example. You can also travel cheaply. But with that said, let's curtail the video. Hit the subscribe button. There's a lot of free education and tools on this channel for you guys to learn more about your own finances, retirement, entrepreneurship, making money, whatever you need to know. And I'll see you either in the next video or one of the previous videos. See you later.